The suns had not yet risen when Jonas Hale heard the thunder. It wasn't the usual kind, the kind that rolled across Alaris 9's sky like an old god clearing its throat. This was sharper, metallic, and close. He stepped out of his cabin, boots sinking into dew-slick soil, and watched as a streak of light carved across the horizon. For a heartbeat, it looked like a falling star. Then it split the clouds and crashed into his western field with a flash that made the morning blink. The ground trembled beneath his feet. He took the old hauler, rusted, stubborn, older than he was, and drove toward the smoke. The air smelled of burnt ozone and scorched grain, a scent he hadn't known since the war. When the wreck came into view, it wasn't what he expected. Not a meteor, not debris. A compact cargo pod, the kind smugglers used to move contraband through planetary checkpoints. It was half buried, still hissing from re-entry. A corporate seal glinted on its surface, half melted, Interstellar Biotech Syndicate. His pulse quickened. He knew that name. Everyone on the frontier did. The hatch was dented but intact, sealed by a flickering security lock. Jonas hesitated, eyes darting toward the sky, half expecting patrol drones to appear. None came. He knelt, pried open a cracked panel, and crossed two live wires together. The lock coughed once and died. When the hatch slid open, a wave of cold air hit him, along with the faintest sound, high and pitiful, like a cry. He aimed his light inside. They were packed so tightly he thought they were sculptures at first. Scales glimmering blue and green, wings folded, tails curled over each other like knotted ropes. Tiny hearts flickered beneath translucent chests. A dozen, maybe more, hatchlings. Dragons. Real dragons. Extinct, outlawed, supposedly purged from existence centuries ago after the Draconic Wars. And yet here they were, trembling in a box, faintly breathing, branded with glowing identification codes burned into their scales. He stumbled back, chest tightening. This was impossible. If the syndicate had these, it meant someone was breeding them again, or worse, experimenting on them. He thought of the rumors, of bioweapons in development, of creatures dissected alive for gene mapping. He shut the hatch quickly, leaning against the metal, trying to steady his breath. Reporting this would be the right thing to do. But the moment the words left his mouth, those creatures would vanish into some orbiting lab and never see light again. Jonas looked toward the distant silhouette of his farm, the barns, the silo, the stubborn little patch of peace he had built after a lifetime of killing. He could almost hear his conscience whispering, "You've done enough, Hale. Walk away, Instead, he reached for the pod's control lever and whispered to the sky, "Not this time." The hauler strained under the weight as he dragged the cargo home. The hatchlings stirred, faint sparks of heat radiating from inside. Above him, a patrol beacon blinked once in the clouds, scanning the land. Jonas shut off his lights and drove in silence, heart pounding, as dawn crept across the twin suns of Alaris 9. He didn't know yet that the universe had just shifted, and that compassion had just declared war on the stars. The hatchlings were restless that night. Jonas could hear their soft chirping through the barn walls, a strange mix of reptilian hisses and melodic tones, like the sound of glass singing. The temperature regulators hummed steadily, trying to mimic the warmth of a dragon's nest, but their bodies emitted heat of their own, faint pulses that shimmered across the air like static lightning. Jonas sat on a crate, wiping oil from his hands, his eyes tracing the movement inside the enclosure. The barn smelled of hay, ozone, and something ancient, like burning minerals after a storm. He had modified the old agricultural bots to help. Marin, his rust-stained plow droid, stood in the corner with a glowing blue lens, now functioning as both caretaker and guard. Its voice was blunt, mechanical, but loyal. Thermal levels remain stable, Jonas. Hatchling metabolic rate increasing by 12%. They're growing. Yeah, he muttered, glancing at Ember, the smallest one, whose scales flickered between gold and bronze whenever she breathed. Too fast. Jonas didn't sleep much anymore. Every distant hum in the sky made him flinch. He'd rerouted the farm's comm array through a jamming field, masking their energy signature from orbital scans. But even he knew it wouldn't hold forever. The Syndicate had sensors capable of detecting a heartbeat from orbit. When he brought fresh nutrient gel to the enclosure, Ember lifted her head and looked straight at him. Her eyes, gold like melted suns, met his, and something passed between them. Not thought, not sound, but emotion. Fear. Hunger. Curiosity. He stumbled back, nearly dropping the tray. "Marin," he whispered, "did you detect?" "Unregistered neural resonance," the droid replied. "Source, hatchling cluster. Frequency, not human." Jonas pressed a hand to his temple. The faint echo of her fear still lingered in his mind, a ghostly ripple fading like the afterimage of lightning. For a moment he saw flashes, cold metal cages, blue-suited figures, the hum of surgical drones. He realized these weren't his memories. They were hers. By morning, the first of the twin suns painted the barn in pale orange light. Jonas stood by the hatch, staring out toward the fields where the crash had burned the soil black. He'd buried the remains of the pod beneath layers of plasteel scraps and sand. Still, the crater glowed faintly, like a wound refusing to heal. "Jonas," Marin said softly, "incoming weather scan shows irregular fluctuations. Orbital activity detected." He clenched his jaw. "Patrols." The droid's lens dimmed in concern. "If discovered, you will face federal charges. Biotech containment violations, harboring prohibited species. Minimum sentence, life imprisonment." Jonas watched Ember crawl toward him, her small wings trembling as if testing air. She pressed her head gently against his hand. The warmth was almost human. He whispered, "Then we make sure they don't find you." Outside, the horizon shimmered with silver trails, distant ships slicing through the atmosphere. The hunt had begun, and Jonas Hale's quiet life on Alaris 9 was over. Jonas woke to the low hum of engines in the sky. It was still dark outside, but the barn's old sensors were flickering red, motion detected along the eastern perimeter. He slipped on his coat, grabbed the plasma rifle he hadn't used in years, and stepped out into the chill. The smell of ozone filled the air. Searchlights swept across the distant hills, cutting through the fog like blades of silver. Patrol craft. They were here sooner than he'd feared. Inside the barn, the hatchlings stirred, their scales reacting to the vibrations. Ember let out a faint growl, the sound too intelligent for comfort. Jonas crouched beside her and whispered, "Quiet now. I'll handle it." She tilted her head, understanding flickering in her eyes, and her scales dimmed to a muted copper glow. The searchlights grew closer. He could hear the muffled thump of anti-grav boots and the low chatter of soldiers. When he peered around the barn door, he saw them. 5 armored enforcers bearing the insignia of the Interstellar Enforcement Unit, the Syndicate's muscle wrapped in the pretense of law. At their center stood a woman in obsidian armor with iridescent implants tracing her temples. Her eyes glowed faintly amber, not mechanical but something older, reptilian. She introduced herself as Lieutenant Cassira Vorn. Her voice was calm, measured, and cold. "Jonas Hale. Former combat engineer. You're 2 kilometers off the registered flight path for debris recovery. We detected anomalous thermal readings from this property. I'll need access to your barn." Jonas forced a smile. "Lost a generator last night. Burned out half my field sensors. You're welcome to scan, but you'll just find dead soil and broken machinery." Cassira studied him in silence. Her pupils contracted like a predator's. "You're lying," she said softly, yet she didn't move. Her wrist console pinged with encrypted signals. The other officers fanned out, scanning the perimeter with drones. Jonas felt his pulse hammering as one drone drifted dangerously close to the barn door. Then something strange happened. The drone's sensors shorted out, its feed filling with static. Cassira turned sharply toward it, and for the briefest moment, her gaze flicked past Jonas, toward the barn, as if she'd heard something no one else could. Ember's presence brushed against both their minds, faint as a whisper in static. Jonas felt it, Cassira froze. Their eyes met, and in that fragile instant, understanding passed between them. She said nothing, only turned to her squad. False alarm. Power residue from the crash site, she ordered. Pack it up. When they were gone, Jonas leaned against the doorframe, breath shaking. Marin's lens blinked blue behind him. She knew, the droid said flatly. I know, Jonas muttered. But she didn't report it. He looked toward Ember, who was watching him with those molten eyes. Why her? He whispered. But Ember only flicked her wings, sending a shimmer of gold light through the barn. Outside, the patrol ships vanished into the dawn, leaving behind a silence thick with secrets and a scent of danger yet to come. The warning came at dawn. Marin's sensors shrieked in alarm as an encrypted transmission cracked through the comm static. Origin unknown, origin too close. Jonas bolted upright from the workshop floor, where he'd slept in his clothes, hands still on the plasma rifle. On the display, a crimson signal pulsed across the map of his property, multiple inbound craft, descending fast from orbit. He didn't need confirmation. The syndicate had come. He ran to the barn, the ground already trembling under the thunder of engines. The hatchlings were panicking, wings clattering, tails lashing against the walls. Ember was at the center, scales bright with energy, her gaze fixed toward the sky as if she could see them approaching. Jonas grabbed a storage panel on the floor and yanked it open, revealing the hidden platform beneath, a relic from the Draconic Wars, an atmospheric lifter buried for decades. He had spent the last 2 nights repairing it, welding wires until his hands bled. Now it was their only chance. Marin, activate the lift core, he ordered. The droid's tone cracked with static. Warning, flight systems obsolete, probability of engine collapse. Do it. The ceiling shook. Dropships broke through the clouds, their hulls marked with the syndicate sigil, a coiled serpent devouring its tail. Spotlights painted the barn in white glare. Jonas felt heat crawl up his spine as soldiers poured out, weapons humming. He ran to the control console, hands flying over manual switches, while Ember let out a keening cry that made the air vibrate. The hatchlings clustered around her, instinctively protective. A blast tore through the outer wall, flinging shards of metal across the floor. Jonas ducked behind the feed tanks, firing once, twice, into the haze. Plasma bolts struck armor and ricocheted. Then he saw her, Cassira Vorn, walking through the smoke, visor up, eyes glowing faintly. You're insane, she shouted over the noise. They'll vaporize you from orbit. Jonas snarled, then help me make it worth it. For a heartbeat, she hesitated. Then something ancient flickered in her eyes, a buried memory of scales, wings, and fire. She turned to her troops and barked, fall back. Contamination risk. They obeyed without question. She spun back toward Jonas. Get them airborne, now. The engines roared, shaking the entire structure. Flames licked the rafters as the lifter tore free from the ground, ascending through smoke and chaos. Below, syndicate soldiers opened fire, but the hatchlings cried in unison, their voices merging into a sound like thunder breaking inside the soul. Plasma bolts curved away, repelled by unseen energy. Ember's wings unfurled, radiant, alive. Jonas gripped the control yoke as the barn and fields fell away beneath them. The world of Alaris, 9 shrank into clouds, and the stars above glimmered like a promise. Cassira stood beside him, silent, watching the horizon blaze with pursuit lights. They won't stop, she said. Jonas's voice was calm now, steady. Neither will I. Behind them, the hatchlings sang, a sound of fire reborn, echoing across the void. The nebula glowed ahead like a cathedral of light. Its vast tendrils of gas shimmered in violet and gold, wrapping around Jonas's old lifter as though testing the courage of those who entered. The ship's hull groaned under the radiation storms, alarms whispering warnings that no human could fix in time. Cassira stood at the viewport, eyes reflecting the nebula's glow, her expression distant. "This is where they were born," she said softly. "The first dragons. Before the Syndicate found ways to break them." Jonas adjusted the stabilizers, sweat beating at his temple. "If this place kills us before they do, at least we'll die where they belonged." Behind them, the hatchlings huddled together in the cargo bay. Their scales pulsed with faint synchronization, an organic hum that resonated with the nebula's rhythm. Ember stood apart, wings outstretched, her gaze fixed into the light as if she were listening to something older than language. Jonas felt it through her, waves of memory and grief, an ocean of forgotten lives reaching across time. Then came the tremor. Not from the nebula, but from above. Marin's voice crackled through the calm, multiple contacts detected. "Syndicate fleet, 6 cruisers, armed and advancing." Cassira swore under her breath. "They'll use a disruptor array. They won't risk the dragons escaping alive." Jonas turned toward her. "What does that mean?" "They'll erase their neural patterns," she said grimly. "No blood. No mess. Just silence." The sky erupted in beams of pale blue light. The disruptor pulse cascaded through space, visible even within the nebula's dense clouds. The ship's shields flared, then failed, systems wailing. Ember screamed, a sound that cracked inside Jonas's head. Through the psychic bond, he felt every hatchling cry out, their minds burning like static. Jonas staggered to the core panel, tearing it open. "Marin, reroute power from the stabilizers into the core." "All of it." "Jonas, you'll destabilize the reactor." "Do it." He slammed his hand against the fusion manifold, connecting his neural link port, a forgotten relic from his combat days, directly into the ship's energy relay. Pain shot through him like liquid fire. He felt the ship's heartbeat merge with his own, circuits fusing with flesh. The disruptor waves hit again, but instead of collapsing, the ship absorbed them. The dragon's cries turned into a rising hum, raw, defiant. Cassira grabbed his shoulders. "You're killing yourself." Jonas's voice broke through the noise, low and fierce. "Not if it gives them a future." The nebula erupted in light. The Syndicate's fleet vanished into static as the pulse inverted, spreading outward like the breath of a sleeping god. Ember rose, wings of flame cutting through the void. For one infinite moment, Jonas saw her as she truly was, neither beast nor weapon, but consciousness itself reborn. Then darkness took him, and the ship fell silent, drifting in the golden storm of the nebula. The silence that followed felt endless. Jonas drifted between waking and the void, his body weightless, nerves still buzzing with the echo of the reactor's pulse. When his eyes opened, the cabin was dim but alive, the panels glowed softly, and faint heat filled the air again. Cassira was beside him, her armor scorched, hair floating like smoke. "You're alive," she whispered, disbelief in her tone. He tried to speak, but the words tangled in his throat. "The hatchlings?" She turned toward the viewport. Beyond the cracked glass, the nebula burned brighter than ever, not in destruction but in birth. Dragons, dozens, maybe hundreds, spiraled through the golden clouds. The hatchlings had grown, their wings vast, their voices harmonizing in a chorus that vibrated through the hull. Ember led them, her body shimmering with molten light. When she turned her gaze toward the ship, Jonas felt warmth spread through his chest. He saw through her eyes, saw himself, frail and human, yet standing against an empire. And she spoke, not with words but through a thought so vast it filled every corner of his mind. You chose mercy when your kind forgot how. You showed us we were more than experiments. Outside, the Syndicate's fleet lay shattered, drifting among the nebula's tendrils. Their disruptors had backfired under the inverted pulse, rendering their systems dead. Cassira watched the debris in silence, the glow of the dragons reflected in her amber eyes. You ended the war, she said softly. Or maybe, started a different one. Jonas managed a faint smile. If it's one built on compassion, I'll take it. They guided the battered lifter toward a small moon illuminated by the nebula's glow. It was barren, silent, but when the hatchlings descended, their fire scorched life into the soil. Moss spread where their claws touched, water formed where they landed. The air thickened with oxygen and light. Jonas stepped out onto the newborn world, feeling gravity beneath his boots, the hum of rebirth underfoot. Ember landed before him, now immense, her head lowering until her eyes met his. Stay, her voice resonated in his thoughts. You are part of this beginning. Cassira helped him down the ramp, steadying him. You'll be remembered, Jonas, she said quietly. Not as a soldier. Not as a farmer. As the man who gave the stars their heart back. He looked up at the swirling sky where dragons danced like constellations. Remembering doesn't matter, he murmured. Living does. When the light of the nebula washed over him, it was warm, not blinding. The dragons rose higher, their songs carrying across the void, and for the first time in centuries, the galaxy felt alive again.